Hey, what's going on, Faithful? I wanted to get on and talk about some underrated prospects for the 49ers in the upcoming draft. So I've been picking up the mock drafting, I think, but in a more intentional sense, and then also in a way to look for some late rounders, some mid rounders that I think would help the team. And I'm always doing that. Anytime I start my scouting process, whether it's in December if the team's already out of it, or whether it's in late January or right after the Super Bowl. I think this year I probably started in the second or third week of January and just kind of picked it up from there. But a few of the guys that I really like are guys that sometimes I watch them early on during the Senior Bowl season, the Shrine Bowl season, and any of those things going on. And a few guys that I end up kind of finding along the way. And I think that this is a good time to talk about two prospects that I really think are going to be guys that the 49ers need to key in. But without further ado, thank you so much for joining me. This is Niners on the Go. I am Guy Deal. And yeah, I think the first one I want to hit on is definitely uh, the edge, because I think that after the first round and the beginning of the second round, I think that edge becomes a place where you can find some guys in the mid rounds and in the late rounds. And if you are really looking for specific type of edge, whether it's because of speed rush or whether it's power and speed or just power, I think that there are guys in the fourth and fifth round that you can find, and guys that might even go in the sixth and seventh. But what you're trying to find, if you're not going to get those guys early on, and in some of my mocks, what I do is I'll trade down, and then I realize that some of the guys that I really wanted in that first, second, or even early third are already gone, yeah, for the edge. And so I just that's when you really have to kind of go back to some of the guys that you watched, maybe some guys that I watched early on in my process when I was scouting them, or later on, or I just feel like I said, like I found along the way when I was watching pretty much all those guys from rounds 1 through 4, rounds 1 through 5. And one guy that stuck out to me was actually a guy that played really well in the Shrine Bowl, and that was Mason Reiger. Mason Reiger is a guy from Wisconsin who just kind of, I don't want to say dominated that Shrine Bowl, but really made his mark in that Shrine Bowl game. And what I like about Reiger is that not only does he have good short area burst, he's not going to wow you with all of his measurables, and especially not, again, long speed. But a lot like running backs, I don't care about a guy's 40 time for those positions. I care about the 40 time maybe for other positions. Obviously at wide receiver, at corner, it matters, and your 10-yard split matters a lot too, but your long speed matters. I think for running backs and pass rushers, I want to know that 10-yard split. I want to know that the short shuttle stuff is really important, because that time is going to tell us that burst, that initial dynamic burst that they have, that they can then use as leverage, or to honestly to just get around a guy and to slap the hands down, to use different rip moves, swim moves, and not just go at bull rush, because all these guys are taught to bull rush, right away, since high school. But it's the different moves, right? It's the multiplicity of moves that you have. And in the NFL, you always have to kind of change up what you're doing. You can't just do the same thing over and over again, because these guys will study you and they will just shut it down. I mean, they're professional, right? They're all really good, but they're also really smart. And at each level that you get up, that's really the thing that ramps up the most. So Mason Reiger, like I said, is a guy that I think he has the power. He's in that 6'3", 250 plus range. I think almost 6'4", actually, 250 plus to 260. And he's a guy that has the speed and the burst, but he also has a lot of strength too. And I think that the thing that I like about him is that he does have some explosiveness to his game, and it's tough to find that when you get into the third, fourth, fifth round, because usually the guys that are most explosive, obviously the guys going early, right? Ruben Bain, all these guys going really, really early in the draft. And Arvell Reese, all the guys that are going in the top 10, top 15. These guys have that explosiveness in spades, as well as obviously that burst and that speed. And then they can just beat you with spin moves, swim moves, everything. And so they have everything in their bag, plus they're elite athletes. But in the later rounds, in the third, fourth, fifth, and beyond, it's really hard to find that because if you have those tools, you're going to go earlier. Well, Riger is a guy that probably could go third round, but a lot of times you're going to see him in the mocks in the fifth, sixth, or later. Some of that has to do with obviously where he played, how he did. Did he play in enough big games? Was his sack production ridiculously great? And the answer to that is no, it really wasn't. But he did get plenty of sacks still, or he did get plenty of pressures. And when he wasn't getting sacks, he was also really affecting the passer because of that explosiveness, and he was getting a lot of QB hits. And so I think he had probably around 5 or 6 sacks. I'd have to double check, but that doesn't matter to me as much as the pressure rate. I of course it matters if the guy only had 1 or 2 sacks, but I think in a 10 or 11 game season in college football, and if you go to the playoffs and then you get an extra game or so, you're really looking to see what guys are doing in a very short, small sample size. And to me, like I said, he just showed me something that stood out on the tape, and he had a really great Shrine Bowl against guys that are going to get drafted in that third round range, maybe fourth round range. So not bad tackles, not bad guards, and obviously not bad tight ends and all these other guys trying to chip him as he comes around the corner. So he's a guy, again, he can play. He can play as a speed rusher, but he can play with his hands on the ground as well. And so I really like that he seems like a guy that's a good enough athlete to give you versatility in whatever you need. And he's a guy that, if you need him to step back in coverage, even if he was a 3-4, not that the Niners are going to play any 3-4, it seems like with Raheem Morris, but if you needed him to do some more 3-4 type stuff, like a smaller edge or outside linebacker, then he could do that. He has the athleticism to do that. He has the pliability and just the smarts to do it as well. So I just, again, guy that I really like. And then another guy that I actually recently found, just kind of going back through my O-linemen and just going through the list of these guys, is a guy that he did get hurt, but he's a guy that for the most part has been really healthy, and that was Billy Schrauth. Billy Schrauth played guard for the Fighting Irish of Notre Dame, and he's a guy that I think had he not gotten hurt this season, he probably would go a lot earlier, but I think that because of that probably hurt his stock some. But I really like him. If you watch his tape, he's a guy that he has decent anchor skills, but what I really enjoyed was his footwork. I thought that he used his feet and he moved them extremely well. And the thing that always impresses me, because in college it's such a different game and it's such a different way to assess blocking and compared to the NFL. And so for me, I'm always looking to see what's a skill that guy has that stood out. And for me, Billy Schrauth was great at, he'd have his guy, his initial guy, but then his help block was really, really good. He'd be able to shift from the initial guy he's blocking to then help out with another oncoming rusher. And he did that really well. Like usually guys try to chip and then the guy's still getting past him, so he barely gets an arm on him. But with Schrauth, I noticed, a few times at least, I want to say at least a handful of times where he was just doing a really good job of, he'd get his guy initially and kind of, not stonewall him necessarily, but hold his point, hold that anchor. And then he'd shift to the other guy and he'd hold up pretty well again. And, he did rate as a much better pass blocker than a run blocker in college with all the measurables that they use. But I actually didn't think he was that bad in his run blocking as well. If you watch the tape, I think, again, kind of nimble feet, big guy, 6'5", 310, 315, somewhere around there. And, so again, big, tall guy, really big hands, I think 10.25-inch hands, maybe a little bit bigger than that. Not the longest arms, but a guy that, like I said, once he got his hands on you and he used his really good footwork, quick footwork to help guide him and push, I thought that he did a really good job. And I didn't see a lot of grabbing. Sometimes guys will block a little bit and then they'll just start holding on and grabbing. And as we know in the NFL, that stuff gets flagged, I feel like, way more than in college. So I really like to see when guys are able to have their hands in a good pad space and not just hold on because they're losing their grip on the guy. And then again, they get flagged, but they're holding him up and they're holding at the point of attack really, really well. So to me, like I said, those are some of the things that I saw with these two guys, and some of the things I really, really enjoyed in watching their tape. And I think that these two guys could absolutely help the 49ers out, even in year one, if they were to obviously not just make the team, but compete for a spot. So those are just some of the guys that I'm looking at, and I look forward to bringing some more content to you guys. Thank you so much. Be sure to like and subscribe. Thanks so much, guys. Take care.